Hello, I'm making this video as a follow-up to my first video that I posted probably maybe 2 months ago about my second kidney transplant and about immunosuppression and some struggles I've been having with the immunosuppression. Basically, I got my second kidney transplant almost 2 years ago in December of 2014. And my FSGS is in remission for the first time. FSGS is what destroyed my native kidneys and my first transplant. So I've been in remission, but I've also been very, very sick from the immunosuppression that you have to take for the entire duration of a transplant to prevent rejection of the kidney. In the video that I posted a couple months ago, I talked about how sick I had gotten, and I talked about a lot of my symptoms, and I also talked about how I had stopped taking my immunosuppression except for the prednisone, low-dose prednisone, but I had stopped taking my Fortic and Prograf. And at the time that I posted that video, I didn't know at that time that I was rejecting my kidney. I don't know if I was beginning to reject it at that point. Based on how I felt, I probably was. But yeah, basically what happened was I stopped taking my immunosuppression and I had an episode of acute rejection, which is, pretty much what they expected to happen. But I don't regret stopping the immunosuppression, which might sound crazy or whatever. But I think that I did what I had to do. I know that I did what I had to do because it was making me very, very sick. And my doctor first thought that maybe I was having a toxic reaction to the Prograf, but it seems like in retrospect I was probably having a toxic reaction to the Myfortic. And the weird thing about the rejection was that usually when you have an episode of rejection, the way that they detect that before they would do a biopsy is, they would see in your lab work that your kidney function is starting to decline. But I had none of that. I had none of that at all. My creatinine was great. It actually improved after I stopped the medication, which I guess is also to be expected temporarily from stopping the Prograf, because Prograf is toxic to the kidneys, even though you need it to prevent rejection of the kidney, ironically. But yeah, my creatinine remained stable, my BUN was stable, everything was good, my electrolytes were good. So we really didn't have much reason to suspect that I was rejecting the kidney. And I mean, other than the fact that I didn't feel good, but I haven't felt well for a long time. But my nephrologist decided to do a routine biopsy about a month and a half after I stopped the drugs, just to make sure that things were okay. We kind of had this wild hope that maybe things would be okay and maybe I would achieve tolerance, which is when you don't need immunosuppression basically, and your body, for whatever reason, just kind of accepts the kidney as your own and doesn't attack it, which is very, very rare. And I knew that going into it. But I also kind of, again, I felt like I didn't have a choice. I don't regret stopping the immunosuppression, because I think that I did what I had to do, given the way that I was feeling, and given the fact that my blood pressure was like 80/40, and I couldn't drive or do anything by myself. I was stuck in a place where I didn't have any family around me. I didn't really have a lot of support. I couldn't drive to my own doctor's appointments anymore. It was a nightmare. It was very, very scary. I was in the emergency room all the time, with severe tachycardia and all kinds of other symptoms, very severe headaches. So yeah, I don't regret stopping the immunosuppression, even though I've had this episode of rejection. But I'm certainly glad that we caught it with the biopsy. And so my doctor admitted that it was pretty weird that my creatinine was stable. So yeah, it's a good thing we did the biopsy, basically, because if not, it might have taken more time for it to affect my kidney labs, and by then the rejection might have been more severe, basically. But I'm lucky that it's acute rejection, and so they think it will be reversible, if they reinstate the right amount of immunosuppression, which is what we've done, kind of. I was in the hospital for a few days on high-dose solumedrol, which is high-dose prednisone, basically, in an IV. They put me back on Prograf, and initially they put me back on Cellcept, and then I started to get very, very sick very quickly when I went back on the Cellcept. Cellcept is basically the same thing as my Fortic, which is the drug I was on before. And the drug that it seems like that was probably the drug that was making me very, very sick for much of this year, but we mistakenly assumed that it was the Prograf, because Prograf is usually the one that can give people a toxic reaction. So yeah, they put me back on Cellcept, and that was horrible. I was back in the ER all the time, severe tachycardia, low blood pressure again, headaches so bad that I couldn't move. And we did like a trough level of Cellcept in my blood, which I've never even heard of before. But apparently it's a thing at some hospitals, and we found that the level of Cellcept in my blood was toxic. So clearly I don't metabolize this drug right for whatever reason. So we stopped the Cellcept, and now I'm back on Imuran, which I was on last year. I'm on a very low dose of it, and so far it's been okay. I've only been on it for a few days, actually. For a while now I've just been taking the Prograf and the prednisone, but they want a third immunosuppressant because they don't think the rejection will be reversed with just the prednisone and the Prograf. In fact, they did a second biopsy last month that showed that the rejection has gotten slightly better, but it hasn't been reversed, and they want to reverse it before it becomes chronic, which would mean that it might not be reversible, and that I would eventually lose my kidney, which is horrifying. So, what do I want to talk about? I've still had problems, mostly with like tachycardia. I have just like unbelievable, almost like constant tachycardia. Like right when I wake up in the morning, my heart is just beating so fast. I mean like 150 beats a minute, just from like going from laying down to sitting up. But my blood pressure is stable, so they don't think it's some form of autonomic nervous system dysfunction, which is what I've been thinking, like something like POTS syndrome. So we don't really know what that's about, which is kind of scary to me, but they put me on a beta blocker a couple weeks ago, and it's been helping. It's definitely been helping. The beta blocker itself has side effects, which is frustrating. I feel very, very tired, extremely tired sometimes. It also upsets your stomach, but it's definitely better, I think, than having a fast heart rate all day long, because that gives me terrible anxiety. So yeah, I'm starting to feel a little bit better. I'm anxious about reversing the rejection. My doctor did a DSA test, a donor-specific antibody blood test, which is I don't really understand why it's different from a biopsy, or what it shows that a biopsy doesn't show, but basically it showed that I have developed donor-specific antibodies to my donor's kidney, which I previously had not had before. So that's not a good sign, but the level, I guess, is low enough that they think it might still be reversible with immunosuppression. The anemia is one of our biggest concerns right now, because I saw a hematologist oncologist last month to talk about the ongoing issue with the anemia, and she agreed that it's from the immunosuppression. So it's kind of it's kind of ironic that I've rejected my kidney because I stopped taking my immunosuppression, and yet my bone marrow still hasn't recovered. So you can have parts of your immune system that are not suppressed enough that will cause you to reject a kidney, and then other parts that are too suppressed. So it's difficult to find a balance of medication that will allow my bone marrow to recover and presumably allow me to start making red blood cells, but that will be sufficient coverage to not reject the kidney, basically. So basically, the hematologist told my nephrologist that I shouldn't take Cellcept or Myfortic or Imuran, which are all B-cell suppressant drugs, and your B cells, I think, are made in the bone marrow, basically. So they wanted to put me on Everolimus with Prograf, which I've never heard of before. I know that Everolimus is pretty experimental, it's pretty new, so I was very reluctant to take it, especially because I know that the toxicity potential of Everolimus can complement and like enhance the toxicity potential of Prograf, or at least that's what my old nephrologist said to me. So I was very wary of trying that because I don't want to be a guinea pig. I was also warned about the potential for a fatal lung disease. Like my doctor, when he was considering before putting me on Everolimus, and he told me, you know, if you have any kind of respiratory symptoms, like any kind of cough or chest pain or anything, like you have to tell me right away, because apparently you can you know, it can cause toxicity in your lungs that can kill you, and people have died from it, and so that really scared me. He also warned me about mouth sores, so I wasn't very enthusiastic about it, and neither was he. But now my other nephrologist, who's Boston-based, because I've moved home, so I've switched my care back to Boston, she wanted me to try Everolimus with Prograf, but it hasn't worked out really, so I'm back on the Imuran. So it's kind of a balance of, I'm not supposed to be on the Imuran because of the bone marrow dysfunction, but basically I'm in the situation where it seems like I'm kind of having to choose between my bone marrow being functional, or my kidney being functional. And we kind of have to choose the kidney because, you know, if I were to lose the kidney, I would be anemic anyway, regardless of the bone marrow function, because your kidney your kidney produces erythropoietin, which is a hormone that stimulates the bone marrow to make red blood cells. So when you're in kidney failure, that's why you're anemic. It doesn't really have to do with the bone marrow per se. So I'm just kind of hopeful that I'm on a low enough dose of Imuran that the anemia will at least remain stable. But I have to say that it's very you know, it's very frustrating to be in this position and to be told by, you know, my nephrologist, both my nephrologists and the hematologist, that like what I'm going through is very rare. Like they don't see this very often. Like they've consulted with their colleagues and everything, and they don't really have anything to compare this to, which is confusing to me because I've read about, you know, post-transplant anemia being a fairly common complication. I mean, if you look at the medication guide for all of these drugs, it seems like anemia is listed on almost all of them. But they keep telling me, you know, your kidney function is good, so we really don't understand why you're anemic, or you shouldn't be anemic, basically, even though there's evidence of the bone marrow dysfunction. They contradict themselves all the time, and it's infuriating. So yeah, I guess I just wanted to give an update because the last video, you know, I talked about stopping the immunosuppression, which is, you know, viewed as like highly irresponsible and risky and reckless and all that, and I had like a lot of faith just out of necessity, I guess, and it didn't work out, and I just wanted to let people know that it didn't work out. And I mean, I guess I'm not trying to say like, oh, you should never stop taking your drugs. I mean, you really shouldn't, obviously. But I mean, if you are at the point where you're so incredibly sick that you're at the emergency room every other day and you feel like you're gonna die and your blood pressure has tanked, then I would say by all means, like, do something. Like, because I don't always believe that the doctors are right. I know that they're not always right. But yeah, I just wanted to give an update. I know I posted my last video in the Facebook transplant group, and I'm gonna post this there as well to give an update. Because you know, I don't want to like inspire anybody to like stop their drugs or something if they don't feel well. I really want to, not that I have that much power, but um, like I really want to emphasize that like I didn't just like stop the drugs because I was like mildly ill. Like I was like really like severely ill, much more than I am right now, thankfully. So yeah, I would strongly discourage you from doing that. Um, what else? I guess that's it. I feel like I had more to talk about, but it has more to do with um, ethics surrounding kidney transplantation and surrounding illness. I might make a separate video for that because it's kind of a big topic. I want to talk more about, um, you know, quality of life after a kidney transplant and how it's just kind of assumed that you're going to have like, you know, a better quality of life than you had on dialysis, and how that is not the case for some people. I think that's the minority of people, obviously, but to be in that position where you can honestly say I felt better on dialysis, is it's very scary, and it's a very like lonely place. It's very, you know, you're ashamed, you're embarrassed, you don't want to talk to people about it. It's just a terrible place to be, and you also don't get a lot of validation from the doctors, seemingly. And so that's something I want to talk about. But I do feel better right now than I felt on dialysis today. This particular day, I feel okay. I feel very, very tired, but I feel grateful to have this kidney, and grateful that that the rejection was caught in time, and grateful just to be alive, even though it's been really difficult. I've been very, very depressed. I've had a lot of changes in my life in the past couple months. I've moved, like I said, I think I said that I moved. So I'm like living with family now. I'm living with my mom in a kind of isolated situation. But I mean, I guess I was also pretty isolated where I was living before. Chronic illness is very isolating. It's and it really wears on you mentally. That's another thing I want to talk about maybe in another post. Is just isolation and what it does to you over time, and how, I don't know, it seems like there needs to be more for people who are chronically ill, who are housebound, people who can't work, you know, opportunities for them to connect with people. And I don't just mean on the internet. You know, I'm on the internet a lot, just because I have a lot of free time, and I don't have any friends in the area where I live now, and I don't have a job, and I'm not well enough to work yet. So it's like, what do? You go online, but and I think you know, it's possible to some extent to find some community online, but it's not the same as being with people, I think, or at least it's not for me. I start to feel kind of crazy if I'm on the internet for too long. It just becomes this like addictive kind of toxic cycle. And I wish that that wasn't the case. Anyway, I'm glad to be alive, and thank you for watching my videos, and thank you to everyone who responded in the kidney group to my last video. And yeah, bye.